Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel for another video this week. Today I have for you all the long-awaited December monthly wrap-up. I thought about skipping it, but I really wanted to have a full year, so here I am, just 2 or 3 months late on my part. But don't worry, I'm gonna slowly catch up on all the videos eventually, hopefully by the end of April. And without any further ado, I'm gonna head right into the reading statistics. This month I read a total of 9 books, coming into around 2,869 pages. Out of these 9 books, 4 of them were from my local libraries, saving me approximately $77.95. In addition to these 9 reads, I ended up rolling over 3 additional reads for the month of December into January. Next is my reading trend for December. Nothing too crazy, except on the 18th, I decided to add in some of my fanfiction reads because I ended up binging so much fanfiction that I feel like I needed to add it into my reading data because it is technically reading, and I feel like I wouldn't do my reading data justice if I didn't include it. Moving right along, let's talk about my average star rating. This month I had an average rating at 411, which is higher than any of the other months in this quarter, so I'm pretty happy about that. Moving along to the formats for this month, 2/3 of my reads this month were digital, 22% being physical, and the last 11% being audio. And as always, I break down the reading format even further so you can really see how these reads were digested. And then finally, we have the genre breakdown. This month, we have a 2-way tie for first place with romance and contemporary, and another 2-way tie for historical and magic. And with that, we are officially finished with the reading data for the last month of 2024. And without any tangent, let's move right ahead into the reads I had for December, with the very first 2 being part of a trilogy, the Beartown trilogy. The first book in the Beartown trilogy is Beartown, and I finished this within 48 hours. Absolutely devoured this book, and I gave it a solid 5 stars. I cannot believe I have waited so long to read Fredrik Backman because this book blew my mind in terms of his writing style, the way his characters are developed, and how much personality and characteristics every single character in this book has. While I do own the book physically, I ended up listening to majority of the book via audio because I love the narrator. I thought that the narrator did a wonderful and fantastic job at giving every single one of these characters their own voices, and trust me, this is a character-driven story with actual plot, and she managed to give every single character in here their own voice, their own personality, and it made it really easy to kind of distinguish whose perspective we are following at the current moment. Now, on the surface, Beartown really feels like it's a sports small town fiction where you follow the lives of people who are deeply invested in hockey. But as the story unfolds, you really get to see the good and bad side of humanity and how absolutely cruel people can be when their passion and pride are on the line. I felt like this book was an extremely solid read, easily digestible, while also having a very heavy social commentary, calling out a lot of disgusting human behaviors. I felt like Beartown is a perfectly acceptable standalone, so if you just want to read one book and not be invested in the whole trilogy, go ahead, feel free to just read the first book. You won't have to continue on with the rest of the series if you don't want to, but trust me when I say you'll be so heavily invested in all the characters in this book that you're going to want to continue on to the next series. And that is exactly what I did in December. Continuing on, I read the second book in the trilogy, Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. Another 5-star read. Again, listen to it via audiobook. Backman does it once again with a continuation of the story with the aftermath of the first book. While the first book does have its own conclusion, he really shows us that things that happen in the book, there are real life consequences afterwards, and there is a cause and effect pattern to it. And in Us Against You, he really built upon the small town that we were familiar with in Beartown and extended it to its fellow rival neighbor. You get to see the dynamics between the 2 neighboring towns and how their rivalry came to be. And in addition to the aftermath of what happened in the previous books, we now have a couple of more problems for the town to solve. And as he's writing the story and introducing new characters, he's able to make some more social commentary and even call out some of my own internal biases. The way he writes, the character he introduces, he really challenges your thinking and your own perspective, and he makes me question exactly why that was my train of thought, why that was my expectation, and I really enjoyed the fact that he was able to really call me out on my biases. Did I think the second book was 100% necessary? No, I don't think so, but I really do love every single character that he has introduced in the first book, and my love for them just continued to grow into the second book. And yes, I finished the third book by January because I couldn't get enough of this world. A solid 5-star read, and I simply think that everyone should try a Fredrik Backman book, especially if you love a character-driven story. Honestly, what else is new? I had to jump on here because I realized mid-editing that I actually forgot a whole book in my December wrap-up, and that book is going to be the 7th Loop Villainess Volume 6 in the manga edition. If you guys have been around here for some time, you know that I started getting back into reading because of this book, and I am currently keeping up with both the light novel and the manga adaptation. Unfortunately, this did receive a 3 stars for me. It was good, but I didn't really think it was exceptional, and quite honestly, the characters that we focused on in this volume wasn't particularly my favorite either, along with a slightly weaker plotline. So as a result, this didn't really blow my mind at all. There are definitely other volumes that I prefer over this one. And post-editing Mimi is out. Let's continue on with the rest of the reviews. Now, my next 2 reads are going to be novellas, with the very first one being The Situationship by Ali Jimenez. I gave this read 3.5 stars, and this basically takes place during the blank period in Just for the Summer. If you know, you know. We're basically following the start of a relationship between 2 side characters, one of them being in Just for the Summer and the other one being part of your world. One thing that I love about Ali Jimenez is how her world eventually interconnects, and you get to revisit some of the characters in previous books. I really enjoyed that, and the situationship is kind of just that. I didn't think it was spectacular, but it did give me a little bit of a glimpse into the blank period inside of Just for the Summer, so I really appreciated that. I will have to say, I didn't really think that the couple were my cup of tea, to be quite honest, especially with how the male character was portrayed in Part of Your World. But nonetheless, it was a quick and easy read. If you love Ali Jimenez and you love Just for the Summer and Part of Your World, I highly recommend reading this book. Otherwise, maybe pass on it if you're not familiar with what happened in Just for the Summer, because it is slightly of a spoil for Part of Your World and Just for the Summer. Now, moving right along, the next novella I read is A Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood. This came out with a collection of short stories / novellas with a couple of other romance authors. I zeroed in on this because, as you know me, Ali Hazelwood is one of my auto buys / auto reads, and I gave this read 5 stars. It is the perfect definition of a snowed-in quick story romance with a little bit of characterization and character depth in it. I absolutely loved it. But with it being sub 100 pages, I don't know how much I can tell you without just spoiling the whole read itself. All I can tell you is that it's a snowed-in romance with our female main lead and her kind of ex-billionaire boyfriend who's technically her best friend's little brother. And I'll leave it at that and move on to the next 5-star read I had in December, which is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Now, in comparison to the 2 romance read I just talked about, The Burning God is its own category. The Burning God finished me when I finished the book. Now, can I tell you anything about this book? Probably not, considering the fact that it is the 3rd and final book of a trilogy, but the only thing I'm going to leave you with is that it was a 5-star read. The whole series of its own was a 5-star series for me, and I ate it up. I ate it up so much, and this book had what you would really call subplot romance, but just that little tidbit of that just made me invest in the story just enough for me to get into the story. And then once I was in the story, I was invested on how the story is going to play out. I will say this book made me question everything that happened in the story, and the fact that some of the events that happened in the book is supposed to be parallel to what has happened and occurred in history made it all the more terrifying but also captivating. I'll leave you with that for The Burning God and move on to The Drowning Faith by R.F. Kuang, which is a collection of snippets of the Poppy War in Neja's perspective. You guys already know I absolutely love him. In my reader's profile tag, I actually want him as one of the characters to be seated at my dinner table. And the reason for that was because I wanted more perspective on what happened in the Poppy War trilogy from his eyes and his point of view. However, since that's not physically possible, the next best thing I had was The Drowning Faith, which gave us a collection of scenes of things happening in the Poppy War trilogy through Neja's eyes, and I ate it up. 5 stars. This was coming off of the high of the Poppy War trilogy itself, so it might be slightly biased, but I don't care. It was a goldmine that I didn't know I needed, and I want more. Genuinely, I don't think RF Kuang's going to do this, but I would eat it up if she re-released the whole trilogy just in Nesha's perspective. Since I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of missing time frame where Nesha and Rin weren't in the same space, and I'm just always so curious as to what's happening behind the scenes during those times. Next up, we have a read from My 10 Before the End in 2024. This book came in as a recommendation from Love Lauren because she said it was her favorite book of 2024, if I recall correctly. And the book is One for My Enemy from Olive Lee Blake. Now, I regret to inform you that between Lauren and I am the imposter. And for once, unfortunately, we did not have the same taste. I gave this book 3 stars, and while I can appreciate Blake's ability to write in almost the Shakespearean way, I found it really hard to follow and get into the story because of the writing style. I really felt like she was able to encapsulate Shakespeare's style of writing into a modern version, but that itself is probably the reason why I couldn't fully connect into the story. I felt like her writing is very lyrical, not floral, but lyrical. There's a very distinct tempo to the writing and to the words, and I can appreciate it from afar, but I think personally I just couldn't get into it. I tried to read it and then also listen to it via audiobook. Unfortunately, neither of the format really helped me jump over this hurdle. Now, the best way I can describe One for My Enemy is that it's a Romeo and Juliet inspired contemporary urban fantasy witches romance. I don't know if I should add the word romance into it. I think there is slight romance, maybe better as a subplot romance. And there's also like the floating idea of a mafia into it as well. It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. And I think there was a lot of potential, but the world building did really feel lackluster to me. I felt like we really focused on plot, and there were a lot of gaping holes as to the whole world itself and just exactly how much power does a witch have. And then in comparison to witches, there are fairies. And then how do they differ in terms of powers? So in terms of world building and structure, I felt like it lacked a lot of foundation for me to ground myself really into the story. I will say, however, the plot kept me going with a lot of mysteries, turns, and twists that I just didn't expect and could not have predicted. Even though right off the bat, the term Romeo and Juliet inspired definitely triggered some thought process in my brain, I still couldn't fully predict what was going to happen to the story. So the plot definitely kept me going, not so much the romance. It's very subplot romance, which I think it makes sense for the story. However, with the lack of world building and the tone and writing, it just didn't produce the best reading experience for me, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Moving on to the final read for December, it's going to have to be Penacony Part 3. Part 3. And there's even a part 4, okay? Is it really necessary for there to be this many parts? Debatable, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. If you want to know more about what penacony is, refer back to a previous monthly wrap-up. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars, though honestly, I think it should be a 3 star, and I would rate, since this part is kind of like the conclusion of the whole penacony chapter. I know I said there's part 4, but part 4 feels more like an epilogue to me, and part 3 did wrap up the story nicely. I did like what happened at the end there, a little bit of a surprise factor, though my husband did say I should have been able to predict it, but I did end up playing the parts so separately that I just didn't exactly remember what happened in part 1 to lead to the conclusion of part 3. But either way, I think that's why it was closer to 3.5 stars than to 3 stars. And with that, we are finally done with the final monthly wrap-up for 2024. Did it take me an absurdly long amount of time to post this video? Yes. Am I still posting it anyways? Yes, because I already filmed it. And aside from this, I am planning to do a full 2024 wrap-up along with a 2024 book ranking. I know it's a little bit late, but I still really want to do those videos. So keep an eye out for those. And for now, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I greatly appreciate it. And if you guys do enjoy this content or are looking forward to some content in the future, definitely make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys next time in another video. Bye!